This is the last part of the course, Photoelectron Spectroscopy. A formal welcome to the sixth part of the course, Photoelectron Spectroscopy. Before we proceed, I think it is important to know the difference between photoelectron spectroscopy and electronic spectroscopy. By now, we know what is electronic spectroscopy. Well, photoelectron spectroscopy, briefly, is the ejection of electrons from molecules by bombarding them with monochromatic photons. And the electrons that are ejected are known as photoelectrons. And the energy of the photons that we send correspond to the X-rays and UV radiations in the electromagnetic spectrum. We first look at a brief introduction to electron spectroscopy, and then we discuss photoelectric effect, and then basic instrumentation, that is setup we use for photoelectron spectroscopy, and then spin orbital splitting, and then Koopman's theorem, and we end with chemical shift. Photoelectron spectroscopy is used to study chemical composition of materials on surfaces. So basically, from an atom, an electron is knocked out. This makes the atom positively charged, that is ionized. And the ionization energies of molecules are several electron volts even for valence electrons. So it is essential to work in at least the ultraviolet region of the spectrum with wavelengths less than about 200 nanometers. We'll discuss three types of photoelectron spectroscopy. X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, or XPS, deals with core electrons of an atom. Ultraviolet photoelectron spectroscopy, or UPS, deals with valence electrons of an atom. And we'll also discuss Auger electron spectroscopy, or AES. We know that X-ray has greater energy than UV rays. So in X-ray spectroscopy, an X-ray knocks out a core electron of an atom, while in UV spectroscopy, the UV radiations knocks out the valence electrons. We then study the kinetic energies of these electrons. Well, it is a one electron process. But in Auger spectroscopy, after an electron is knocked out, the hole created is filled by an upper electron, and this transition releases energy which knocks out another electron. So a total of 3 electrons are involved. While studying the atoms, we observe that as the atomic number increases, the X-ray yield also increases, but the Auger electron yield decreases. In photoelectric effect, we know that H nu, which is the energy we provide, equals ionization potential plus kinetic energy of molecules in gas phase. In case of solid phase, H nu equals binding energy plus kinetic energy plus the work function. And we need to remember that the UV radiations range from 3 to 30 electron volts, and the soft X-rays range from 100 to 1000 electron volts. And the sources we use in the laboratory are magnesium K alpha and aluminum K alpha, which are X-ray sources, and helium 1 and helium 2, which are UV sources. Here we'll discuss few important points regarding photoelectric effect. Photon absorption is a very fast process, and there is a minimum frequency called the threshold frequency below which we cannot detect photoelectric effect, and the intensity of the spectrum is directly proportional to the number of photons provided by the source. It also helps us in identifying the element, since each element has a unique set of core levels. The binding energy of 1s electron is greater than the binding energy of 2s electron, and that is because of the greater nuclear interaction between the 1s electron and the nucleus compared to the 2s electron and the nucleus. Binding energy of sodium 1s electron is lesser than the binding energy of magnesium 1s electron, which is lower than the binding energy of aluminum 1s electron, and that is because of the greater charge that aluminum possesses. And finally, binding energy of orbital is not affected by isotopes. That is, binding energy of carbon-12 1s electron is the same as the binding energy of carbon-13 1s electron. This spectrum shows the relation between binding energy and intensity. In this part of the spectrum, it indicates the photoelectrons with energy loss. And this energy loss can be due to inelastic scattering, and this can reduce the kinetic energy and can prevent from escaping from the surface. And these peaks indicate photoelectrons without energy loss. This is the instrumentation or the setup required for an X-ray spectroscopy. One thing we need to note is that we need ultra high vacuum system of the order of 10 power minus 9 torr for the X-ray spectroscopy. Since XPS, or X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, is a surface sensitive technique, the contamination on the surface can lead to incorrect analysis.
So to remove the contamination, the surface is bombarded with argon ions. And heat and oxygen are also used to remove hydrocarbons which are present on the surface. What we observe in a p electron spectrum are two peaks while we expect only one. And this is due to spin-orbit interaction. So the p subshell splits its energy to two states with each having its own degeneracy. Let the quantum number j denote the total angular momentum, L orbital angular momentum, and S spin angular momentum. So the total angular momentum j is given by L plus S, and degeneracy of each state is given by 2j plus 1. For example, p orbital, we have two states p3 by 2 and p1 by 2, and the degeneracies of these states are 4 and 2 respectively. And the ratio of their intensities is given by the ratio of their degeneracies. So for P subshell, the ratio of their degeneracies is 4:2, which equals 2:1. Similar to that of P subshell, D subshell also has two energy states, and the area ratio is given by 2 by 3, which is the degeneracy ratio. We observed that P, D, and F electrons have doublet peaks, but for an S electron, there is no doublet peak observed. In any compound, the values of spin orbital splitting and peak area ratios of a core level of an element is nearly the same. And we have the Hund's rule, which says that the level with the highest J value has the lowest energy. So in a P subshell, P3 by 2 has lower energy than P1 by 2. Now we move on to Koopman's theorem. It says that the ionization energy is equal to the negative of the orbital energy of the ejected electron. Or simply, the binding energy of an electron is the difference between the initial state and the final state. Experimentally measured binding energy and calculated binding energy using Koopman's theorem differ only by 10-20 electron volts, and this is due to the electron rearrangement after ionization. This graph shows a good agreement of experimental and calculated binding energy using Koopman's theorem. Observe this molecule carefully. The carbons are attached to different groups that have different electronegativities. The spectrum for 1s electron of carbon looks like this. For the same 1s electron, we have different peaks, and this is explained by chemical shift. And the reasons for chemical shift are the formal oxidation state of the atom and the local chemical and physical environment of the atom in a molecule. Let's take an example. Silicon in this compound SiO2 has an oxidation state of +4, and we see that the spectrum is shifted to the left. Well, this is because that the higher oxidation state on silicon means that there are lesser electron density near silicon, so there will be greater nuclear pull by the nucleus. So it will be harder to remove an electron, and hence the electrons will have more binding energy. And conversely, for example, O to O minus, the oxygen atom gains an electron. And by using a similar argument, the binding energy of oxygen decreases. Now let's talk about UPS or ultraviolet photoelectron spectroscopy. The excitation sources have energies lower than 150 electron volts, and this can be easily produced by a UV lamp. And UPS gives information about the valence electrons of surface molecules. And UPS has better resolution and is better characterized than XPS. Here we have three potential energy curves. The difference in the position of the excited states is due to the change in the bond order when the molecule is ionized. In the first case, the excited state is to the right. That is, its equilibrium bond length has increased. It means that the bond order of the molecule has decreased since the bond order is inversely proportional to the bond length. And we can justify the other curves using the same argument.